Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where it's about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Lovecraft Country. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I think it's actually kind of interesting, kind of finally getting some resolution to this whole... Well, it's interesting because her mom says Jaya, but Atticus says Gia. I might flip back and forth, or maybe I'll just end up sticking with it. I have no idea. We'll see how this whole thing plays out. But we kind of, because it's been a mystery about like what her situation is, you know, because obviously Atticus talked about it a little bit last episode. About the whole situation of like, things kind of ended strange, and it's like, what does that mean? And like she was like, I told you not to go home, but we kind of get more context to that. Cause we see kind of her upbringing and stuff like that. Like obviously it's like her mom is like, you need to find a husband and everything. Because it's like their family's kind of in shame and stuff like that, because it's like, oh, without having a husband, I think it's just that kind of thing of like your family's kind of incomplete. You know, once again, this is coming from someone who is obviously not well versed in Korean culture. So this is me from my outside perspective trying to learn stuff from the episode. But it was interesting too because like I think maybe this is kind of that outside of America perspective of kind of like you have your own maybe preconceived notions because like, you know, your only experience with America is probably through film. I mean, and maybe not even just film in general, but maybe it's just like it seems like she latched on into particular this one film, a Judy Garland film in particular. Obviously, I'm not a movie buff, so I'm not. It's a classic that I'm sure I should be well versed in, but I'm not because I'm like I said, just not a movie buff person like that. But nevertheless, she kind of latches onto this, but obviously once again, her mom wants her to hurry up and get married, and obviously she's working at like a hospital as like a nurse, and I think she's thinking like, once I, graduate, because they're in training, so basically she's like, once I graduate, I'll be in a good enough position so that we'll have enough money to do what we want to, so, pay for like the things that we need type of situation. But it's like, hearing her friend talk about like, oh, how she swayed a guy, and you see her kind of going like speed dating basically, and she's trying to apply that, but it doesn't work for her. And she even quotes the movie she's in love with, and the dude is like, whoa, like the Japanese have taken from us, have kind of like taken from our culture, and you have the nerve to basically be quoting American movies to me or something like that. I was like, oh, that sucks. But I mean, within the confines of everything, like obviously, even that's something I'm ignorant on. Like I remember learning about that when I was younger in school, but I feel like that's not something that was ever fully tackled on history-wise. At least my experience in history classes. I mean, and I've talked about this before. HBO has done this interesting thing where it's like it taught me things I don't remember learning. Like much like in the Watchmen situation, like there being obviously the nasty sides of history that I never learned about in history, even, as a black person, I never knew, the whole Black Wall Street situation. I never knew that, like the whole Tulsa thing, like that was my first time experiencing that. So, and I think, so it's not something that's really taught in school. And the whole, like the aspect of like the history, between Japan and Korea specifically. I don't think it's all of Korea. I don't know if it's both North and South. It might have been specific. I think it's specifically South Korea and Japan, I think. But that's like I said, like I barely remember that, but I do know that was kind of a nasty point in history just because of what happened to the Korean people, because that whole situation. So It was just that context in that moment just hitting you and like, oh, right, it's just like, so I can understand where that guy is coming from, that perspective. But then like, Ja ends up, that next dude, she quotes the movie. It's like, this is my favorite movie. He's like, oh, I've seen it twice. She's like, oh my God, I love this song. What's your favorite song? And he says one, and it's like, oh, and it's like, oh my God, pairing off. Oh, and he crosses her name out. And even I'm like, what the fuck, dude? It seemed like you two were hitting it off. And then just as he's leaving, he's like, well, I wish you the best of luck. And she's like, fuck. I was like, so that was actually kind of a shame. But it's like, it was also this interesting thing where it's like, and I think this is kind of an interesting conversation too about the whole being different thing. Because it's like, because obviously we end up learning about Gia's situation about her. Like, obviously, she ends up bringing that dude back home, which I'm immediately like, hey, that's the actor who played Hero's best friend in the TV show Heroes, which I feel bad because I always allocate that actor to that, because anytime I see him, I'm like, hey, because I'm actually blanking on his name because it's been a while since I've seen Heroes. But nevertheless, I'm like, oh, this is interesting, and they shack up and everything. And then it's like, oh, but then, like, you see this look in her eyes. It's almost like this emptiness. I'm like, what's up with this? And then all of a sudden, all these things start sprouting out. And you're like, what the hell? And then, they start inserting in this dude, his mouth, his eyes. And you're like, what the hell? They're just coming out from all over her body. And she's seeing all these flashes of his life and stuff like that. I'm like, what? And then, like, he explodes. And I'm like, oh. So immediately my brain was like, wait, can she see? Like, part of me was wondering, does she kind of work a little bit like a, I always got to bring it back to Doctor Who. Kind of similar to the Weeping Angels. I was wondering if that was it. Like, basically, she steals the life that someone would live, because it showed him having a baby, him climbing at the top of, like, a mountain. Could have been, like, Mount Everest or something. But, like, that's what I was wondering, like, does she steal people's future? In particular, it seems like she steals people's souls because she's possessed by something known as a kumio, which I think is interesting. You know, just jump straight to it. It's a nine-tails. I was like, it didn't even correlate in my head that that's what those were. Those were tails. Which is obviously my association with tails, in particular nine-tails, because obviously I didn't know that played a big part in Korean mythology as well, because I know it does because foxes are tricksters. I wonder if it's the same thing, you know, in Korean. But obviously, once again, this is just based on just a little bit I know about Japanese mythology, but also just, like, you know, stuff I've picked up from anime. I mean, the first thing that comes in my mind when I think Nine-Tails is, you know, Naruto. You know, I mean, because obviously that's even interesting too, because obviously there's a whole bunch of tailed beasts. That's the whole thing. We're not about to deep dive into Naruto here, but it just immediately hit my, when I was like, oh, that's what you are. But it turns out, like, she's devouring people's souls, and when she says she devours their soul, she basically learns what they knew. She gains all their memories when she devours it. So it's not just what they knew and what they experienced. You also see what their life would have been, you know? So that's an interesting and complicated thing to kind of live. But it's like her mom is setting up this situation of, like, you need to kill these people. You need to take their souls, because once you've done 100, you're human again. Because then she also starts referencing her dad, and it's like, wait, what? And her mom's like, don't bring up that man. And it's like, what? And so obviously Gia has this complicated thing, because, like, part of her kind of enjoys being who she is, and it's like, my mom wants me to change. And she had brought it up to her friend, because it turns out, you know, her friend is a quote unquote, you know, communist, and obviously not the best place to be one. And it's this whole thing of, like, showing you, because obviously, like, I'm skipping all over the place, so I do apologize, but obviously, like, American soldiers are coming, and it's like, oh, we're here to fight for your freedom, no need to fear, you know, that being the whole thing. So it's a situation where obviously she ends up finding out her friend is actually a communist, and they watch as this guy is hung in front of the entire, like, town. And they're actually chilling. They're cheering. They're cheering, like, oh, kill the communists. Man was literally hung in front of them. And her friend also points out, like, look, the American soldiers, they're here to protect us. They're not doing jack shit about it. But now it's like, okay, now she only has one more soul to go. But it's like, obviously for Gia, it's like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be, you know, I don't want to change because I like who I am. But, like, her mom is desperate to get her back, because we end up finding out the reason why she got possessed by this spirit in the first place is because her mom summoned it. Her mom wanted revenge, because she ended up finding out her husband was raping her daughter. Like, because she was like, because, like, Jiha was trying to understand. She's like, what was wrong with our relationship? She was like, that's not the right kind of love. And the moment that came out, I was like, and obviously, like, because that's what I'm saying, like, Jiha she was faking being human, because since the spirit became part of her, like, it's almost like that human side of her kind of faded away, and so she's kind of had to fake it. That's why she was doing that whole awkward thing of trying to attract someone, because she doesn't, like, it's like, she doesn't know how to, like, handle human emotion, like, at all. Like, it seems like that side of her kind of died the moment she got possessed, and so she's trying to fake it being human. That's why she's kind of having a hard time kind of necessarily attracting people. And that is kind of an interesting aspect to this, like, your need for revenge, because her mom was so desperate. Because in her mom's mind, it's like, I want my revenge, but it's also like I'm trying to protect my daughter. I was willing to pay any price. Didn't realize that price would involve turning your daughter into a monster. So for her, it's like I'm trying to do all this, like having you do all these terrible things. It's for the sake of getting you back to being human again. But obviously for Jiha, it's like that's not what I want anymore, because she has no connection to who she was before. It's like I'm a different person, and she starts singing this song, and she's like, because she's like, no, you say my daughter's not in there anymore, but she definitely is. She's like, I see it in the way you say certain things and the things you say. It's like, I know she's still in there, so I know she can be brought out. And she starts singing a song. She's like, see, that's my daughter. But she's like, no, I don't know that song because I remember it. I know that song because that's the song your daughter would sing when your husband was raping her. And it's like, I only know that song because I have his memories, you know? And so it's like, and then she starts turning it against her mom by being like, he came around, you know, because you were a pariah. You were a woman that had a child out of wedlock, and he felt, you know, and it's kind of like, it's almost kind of a thing of like, you knew what was going on, but you were so desperate to get out of this shame and everything, you know, you didn't want to be kind of looked at as this pariah anymore, because he brought honor to this family. Once again, I guess it's that thing. I think it's mainly because it's like, oh, you're a wife with a child. You know, I mean, obviously that's not just like, I don't think that's not just a Korean thing. That was just kind of like a thing of, I'm sure at that time, but obviously like before that time, I think in general, like obviously it's like, oh, you had a child out of wedlock was kind of frowned upon in general. But I think probably maybe even more so maybe in the Korean culture, maybe not necessarily probably today, but maybe at that time. Once again, I'm ignorant to the Korean culture, so I do apologize. But I just thought it was, you know, it's just like, but it's like, it's kind of sad because like her mom has this guilt over like, you know, it's like what happened to my daughter, on like she blames herself on twofold, because it's like what happened to my daughter and what I made my daughter into. And let's not forget, she's killed 99 people. It's like that's gotta weigh something on you. But to be fair, she doesn't necessarily feel anything. So then there's the whole situation where her friend ends up that was a brutal scene where it's just like everyone get on your knees, and it's like which one of you are communists, and and it's interesting because part of me would have, I think it hits me a different way, it being a black guy that did it, because I guess in my mind it would have never, I guess because of the situation they came from, like why would you be so, but it's also at the same time it's like you're trying to like be more than just like, because obviously the country you're from, it's like you being in this position, it's like you're a soldier, you're going to follow orders. I mean, I'm sure it applies even more so as a black man, like no, you can't be disobeying orders in jail. But I think it's just because of like the honor and prestige that it could bring with it, so you're not just a black man, you're a soldier, so it carries some weight. So it just I don't know, it made me feel a little weird because it ends up being kind of this conversation of like, you are from a country where you're oppressed and you're being here as a soldier oppressing other people. But I mean, like I said, my head is just filled with stuff where I'm just kind of like, I mean, maybe that's the point where it's just kind of like, I mean, you're in a position where you have power over someone else, where when basically in your own life, other people have power over you back in your own home, you know? So that's why I'm like, it makes, it's a complicated thing in that regard, you know? And obviously a soldier comes over, and I was hoping at the very least he'd have some hesitation. Atticus comes over, kills the woman that's right next to Jiha, and it's like, oh shit, you know? And it's just like, he just seems so hard, like in the sense of like it didn't bother him, you know? But you know, it does. But I think it's like you have to follow orders, you have to do what had to be done. And her friend goes like, okay, it's me, I'm the communist, she gets taken, the rest have to be, you know, it's like, go back to work after seeing both of your, like, two of your coworkers, like, or fellow, you know, medical people shot in the head right beside you. It's like, you know, I mean, and I think that's, you know, once again, it's this time, this place, this war, you know? And later on, Jiha sees Atticus there recovering. And obviously his glasses are broken, and he's trying to read the Count of Monte Cristo, which I vaguely have a notion of that story, but it's like, I feel like I know what it is about, but at the same time, it's like, no, it seems so foreign to me. I feel like I might have read excerpts from it in high school, maybe, or like some, you know, English class or whatever, you know, but even then, it's like, for her, it's like she sees Atticus. It's like, this is the man that killed my best friend, and she's just filled with rage. And obviously, like, he's asking her, like, oh, can you read this book to me? And she's like, well, this is how it ends. And it's like, for her, it's like, well, actually, she only watched the movie. He's like, actually, read the book. It's actually quite different. But obviously, she initially gets close to him at first. Like, it's a thing of trying to get close to him, but also at the same time, she doesn't want to get close. It's just like she's so angry. And obviously, we also get introduced to, what was his name? Sung. Which obviously he kind of adds a certain perspective to Jiha about, like, their situations. It's like, oh yeah, like, both of us, we back in America, it's like, nah, like, because once again, I think she had this very preconceived notion of America because of movies like the Judy Garland movie. But it's like, oh, being black, not good. And his friend's Song's situation is like, oh, my situation's just as effed up. He's like, in America, they call me this. I can't be here because I don't really fit in here. He's like, so I'm literally a foreigner wherever I go. Like, so, and he's like, for him, it was just, he didn't have a choice. He was drafted, but he's like, oh, Atticus signed up. And Atticus, obviously we know he did it to get away. And he talked about it. It's like, he used to be able to get away with just being in books. They were able to take him on these adventures so he could get away from his life. Now books weren't enough. And now all he has is the books because he can't get away from all the terrible stuff that's going on now, what he's done, and because of that, Jiha starts reading the book to him and everything. And obviously, like, she talks about, like, oh yeah, my friend gave me this advice about not, if you don't want to, like, because they talked about, like, their parent situation. It's like, my mom wants me to change, and it's like, my dad, his oppression kind of led me here. And it's like, we shouldn't let their fear shape us. It's like, yeah, that's what my friend's best friend, he's like, oh, I'd like to meet this best friend. And you can see that kind of triggered something. It set her off because it's like, because that's the effed up thing. Atticus doesn't remember her. And I think that speaks volumes because, I mean, in many regards, because it's just kind of like you're blind to everything and everyone just because of, I got to do what I got to do, bam. But also how much it tortures you, you're going to block it in your memory. So he doesn't remember. I mean, it was in that instant, but it's just like, that was a moment that is like, but maybe the argument could be there's so much death and destruction that you just want to block it all. So, and I'm sure for her, that's probably what pisses her off even more. It's like, oh, you're talking about wanting to meet my best friend. It's like, you don't remember me. I was just kind of a face in a crowd of a line of women. Like, so you didn't really remember me. But obviously they do get closer over time. And the fact is that when it's all said and done, like, obviously he sets up this little movie date for her. And it was this beautiful moment. It's just kind of like what their story is, and I think it's supposed to be, once again, I'm not well versed in the Monte Cristo story, but I think it's supposed to be a parallel because she had made a point about the movie, how in the movie a character finds out early on, and it's like them getting together at the very end of it all. It's like it takes away some of that motivation of like you had revenge in your heart the entire time, but them becoming getting together in the end just kind of takes something away. So I think that's kind of the parallel they were going for in this story too, because it's like she's it's like we as the audience know for a while now, partway through the episode, like, a good chunk through the episode, what her true intentions are. Obviously Atticus is unaware of them, but later on they're about to do their thing, but because for one she finds out like he's a virgin. And obviously, hearing about, like, him not liking what he's done. It's like, I've done a lot of terrible, things. And obviously, she's hesitant. And, she pushes him away, tells him to get out. But her mom's kind of like, wait, what? Do this, you could be human again. But also, it's like, you are going to, like, fall for the man. Because she's like, you tell me I don't have feelings. I can't feel anything, Mom. But obviously I can. I feel something to him. But she's like, that if you've fallen for him, that makes you even more of a monster. Because you fell for the man that killed your best friend. And obviously, later on she shows up at base and she ends up telling, Atticus, like, the truth. It's like, you killed my best friend. And he's like, you knew the entire time, you didn't tell me, like, you strung me along, like, what kind of person does that make you? And she's like, we've both done monstrous things, but it doesn't make us monsters, Because Atticus had talked about the fact is that being with her, like, he feels like the way she looks at him and being with her makes him feels like there's good in him, and he being around her makes him kind of probably feel less like a monster, much like her. Like being around him makes her feel less like a monster. So it's just this interesting thing where they kind of found something in each other to fight back their demons, you know? And despite it all, they end up, you know, falling for each other, and it ends up being, you know, this very beautiful and complicated thing because her mom is, you know, ignoring her. And it's just like, because obviously for her, she ends up talking about it later on. It's like, if you said I can't feel anything, but obviously, like, I have people who care about me. I had a best friend who cared about me. Atticus cares about me, so I know you can care about me. I might not be like the daughter you want, but I can be like, I'm not, you know, the daughter you wanted and loved is gone, but like I'm still here. I can be that daughter. But it's like, you say all that they care about you, but have you told Atticus the truth? And she kind of slowly tries to wane the truth to him about like, hey, I'm this like she starts telling him the folklore about the Ninetales, and obviously for him it's like, I've got enough points that I can go home, but he's like, I can stay here, and you know, she's like, but I don't want you to do that for me, because I think she's feeling guilty because of what I am and you don't know. I don't want you to stay here not knowing the truth about me. And he's like, then come with me. And so during some passionate lovemaking, because before she was able to control the tails, but this time it was just too much. I guess she'd been fighting it so much that now the fox was fighting back, and it ends up attacking Atticus. And you're like, okay, so now we understand what her message was about. She knew what was going to happen to Atticus, because we even see in her vision, we see her with Letty, and so it makes you understand what happened, why Atticus was freaked out, why he was like, oh, it ended in a strange way, but also what her message was about not going back home. And now it makes sense because of this whole situation. So maybe that's why Atticus has handled this supernatural stuff a little bit better than everyone else has. I mean, granted, it's still kind of like, what? Because I'm sure in his mind, he's like, what the hell did I see? That was crazy. Maybe I was tripping or something. But now it's like, which is interesting because he's had an early experience with the supernatural, and now it's like, it's come back again. So that's why I feel like it makes me wonder, like, maybe that's why I still feel like he's handling this a little bit better than like George handled it, or granted, who knows how long his dad, you know, Montrose has kind of known about the obviously this world of magic and stuff. Like, we don't know how long he's necessarily been involved in all of this either. So, but I think Atticus kind of handles it the best, and that kind of seemed, like I said, probably in his mind, it's like, oh, that was something else. I don't really know. Maybe I was hallucinating. Maybe I didn't see what I really thought I saw, you know? But obviously, Giago is trying to tell him, it's like, no, like, you're going to die if you go back. Don't go back home. But obviously, you know, he's so freaked out. He's like, stay away from me. What was that? Stay away from me. And it's like, you fell in love with someone, and the moment, it's like, for her, it's like, let me explain. I'm a Kumio, like, but he already left. And obviously, she's there crying, but her mom is there to comfort her. Because I think despite everything, it is the thing of, like, seeing how heartbroken she is and seeing her tearful like that. It's like, I think for her, it's like, I've never really seen you like that, so this means something, you know? So they end up visiting the shaman later on, and I think it's so interesting because, you know, Gia is looking and she sees a fox, so I guess that's like what the fox spirit really looks like. But they end up talking to her, and it's like, okay, you come here, you know, only 99 souls. But obviously for her mom, it's like, I will pay whatever price it is for my daughter. So it's like she's trying to get answers of like, will Atticus die? And it's like, you have not completely been cemented by the darkness, so before your journeys end, you will see countless deaths. So, you know, and I'm curious to see what that, because I'm assuming that means going forward she is keeping the fox, and I'm wondering, is it because of Atticus she wants to keep it? I'm curious, are these stories going to come back and intertwine? Like, will she be back in Atticus's life, or is it supposed to be kind of like her own story being kind of like it's connected while still, because once again these stories are disconnected, they're only slightly connected I think in the books, once again coming from someone who's never read the book but just hearing people talk about it, but obviously they have a more main through line in the TV show. So I'm curious, is that storyline going to tie back more directly, or is it just going to be a thing if she stays in Korea to try and give Atticus the message of like, yeah, you are going to die, we've seen what his future holds for him. And even she's like, it makes you, with her powers, like, is it cemented in stone or can it be changed? Like, can someone's fate be changed, or is it, set in stone? So I'm curious to see how this ends up playing out, this new development. It's a very sad story at the end of the day. It's just kind of like there was something beautiful born from the monsters that they were, and for things to kind of end the way they did, and it makes you wonder. It's like, I mean, once again, maybe that was fate for her to be in that position where she tries to hide her tails and it ends up getting revealed and scaring him back home. It's like it was always meant to play out like this. He was always meant to go back home because his destiny awaits, and what that destiny necessarily is, we'll just kind of have to wait and see. But I'm really curious to see what that all means. Like I said, like it's like you will see more countless death before your journeys, and so part of me, it's like, is that related to the stuff related to Atticus, all that stuff with the Order, or is it more so specifically tied to the fact is that going forward she is going to have more visions of people's deaths, like until your journeys, and you will, anyone that you're with, you will see that. So maybe that's what that's supposed to represent, because I guess it's like until you grow old and die, like this spirit's going to stay with you. Because who knows whether it's a situation where it's like I don't know if it's like she's immortal or not. Like, I don't know if typically, I think it probably depends on like the mythology and stuff like that, whether or not the fox spirit gives you immortality. Will you live as long as it lives? And I'm sure like the moment you die, it leaves you and kind of goes, I don't know. It's just a lot of interesting stuff that I'm curious, like, are we going to get answers to some of that? I feel like probably Atticus related stuff, sure, but like what this all means for her going forward, I'm wondering will we get answers on that. But like I said, it was a great episode, and I'm curious to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.